Ahead of Veterans Day, we want to shed light on an organization that recently received government funds to use AI to analyze computers and cell phone data left behind by military service members who died by suicide. Organizers hope the insights gathered will help prevent future suicide deaths among the military ranks and possibly beyond. ABC's Em Nguyen has the story in tonight's Prime Focus and a warning to our viewers. Our next story deals with the difficult subject of suicide, and some may find it triggering.
Spread across this table, the cell phones, tablets, and laptops of veterans, all of whom took their own lives. Inside each device is what one organization believes holds the key to preventing the nation's growing number of military suicides.
If we could gather novel data from those that have died by suicide, we might be able to recreate the last year of life.
That information, Stop Soldier Suicide CEO Chris Ford says may be able to help his nonprofit gain insight into the telltale signs that a service member may be considering suicide and what may have led up to that final decision. Ford naming this initiative the Black Box Project after the black boxes found on planes that help trace the origin of aviation incidents. According to the VA, veterans are 57% more at risk for suicide than non-military adults, and more than 6,000 veterans die a year from suicide.
I think we can prevent needless suffering and a ton of loss of life.
This phone belonged to Connor McDaniel, the beloved son of David McDaniel.
This is the flag that was draped over his coffin.
This father proudly sharing the military memorabilia honoring his son.
He wanted to go directly fight the bad guys.
Connor joined the Army right out of high school. His dad saying his bright personality carried with him, even during his deployment to Afghanistan, where he was assigned to protect local villages from the Taliban.
Some of his Army buddies told me that he was making them laugh while they were being shelled in Afghanistan.
But it wasn't long after Connor came home that David says he sensed a shift in his son's behavior.
There was definitely more anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of gloominess.
It was September 1st, 2021, when David says his son entered a wooded area with a firearm.
I start screaming his name as I'm walking up the field. And just then the police, the sheriff's department shows up, and they tell me to come back down.
He followed their direction, but on the car ride home, an officer called him.
Said that Connor was dead. That he had fired upon the sheriff's deputies, and they had returned fire and killed him.
Connor was just 26 years old. His death determined to be a suicide. The district attorney's office concluding the officer's actions were justified.
Disbelief. I still have a hard time believing that I'm never going to see him again.
Grappling with Connor's choices, David was immediately drawn to the Black Box Project, which uses forensic software to unlock and comb through deceased service members' devices provided by their loved ones to review their activity in the weeks leading up to their death. McDaniel works in the tech field and says if the project can find repeated patterns in, for instance, online searches, they may be able to help others.
I know for a fact that my son searched for SGLI. It's the Soldier's General Life Insurance. So when a soldier searches for SGLI and maybe some other words like suicide, that's going to be a clear trigger that they may need help.
And you're hoping what would come up?
I'm hoping an ad for Stop Soldier Suicide would come up literally in the Google results on the first line and say, hey, if you're considering harming yourself, please reach out.
Ford says they use machine learning, natural language processing, a subcomponent of artificial intelligence, to analyze texts and notes in order to determine sentiment or emotional tones such as anger or desperation. He says they can also track phone usage to monitor sleep cycles and trace the subject's geolocations.
How does AI play a role?
Well, machines can go through computations a lot faster than humans, and they can find signals that we often miss. Looks like we have an Android in.
Ford says the Black Box Project, which launched in April 2020, has received over 100 devices. So far, he says they're seeing 3 patterns before most of these suicides: more anger, different sleep patterns, and social social isolation.
We'll make a forensic copy of the...
He says he's also finding new patterns that may possibly refute prior conceptions around suicide, where some studies suggest a minority of all suicide victims leave a note.
We're actually finding in our test data that there are drafted and deleted suicide notes in more than half the devices we've looked at.
Ford's team includes PhDs in clinical psychology and suicide researchers, and they work with a scientific advisory committee which helps steer where and what to look for. Stop Soldier Suicide says the goal with these findings, though still preliminary, is to help the nonprofit decide where, when, and how to target its own mental health resources. For instance, adding more hotline staff at certain hours and ensuring calls are picked up overnight.
Did you ever question if you thought this project would be a breach of privacy for those who had already passed, even though they were already gone?
Absolutely. We take our client data and their privacy front of mind every day.
Current privacy laws do not carry on past death, meaning the next of kin typically gains new authority.
We don't resell the data. We don't push it out to others. We use it for our own research purposes so that we can best understand risk and then give those devices back to those families intact.
I actually come onto the installation probably 2 to 3 times a month.
Petra Jackson Oxford was married to Anthony just short of 32 years before he died by suicide.
I feel closest to him because this is where he was stationed. This is where I met him. This is where he did his last tour.
She says the day she lost her husband started like any other morning.
And I talked to him while I was in the kitchen and he didn't say anything. And then as I'm walking back into the den and walking towards him sitting in the reclining chair, I realize he's not alive anymore. He took his life.
Jackson Oxford was left with mounting questions and a phone, which she gave to the Black Box Project, ultimately hoping the contribution could save even one life.
I truly believe he would have been okay with it. And it's a hard thing for a survivor to give up something so personal as his cell phone.
What do you think the military meant for him?
Everything in terms of who he was as an individual.
It was almost his identity?
Yeah, it was definitely his identity. These men and women are putting their lives on the line for us.
Now, Jackson Oxford says she's dedicating her life to helping other surviving service family members connect with helpful measures.
Your loss became your mission.
No one should have no resource.
Resources also a concern for McDaniel, who's advocating for new legislation to remove the stigma around mental health in the military. Because most mental health assistance is optional post-deployment, he's proposing making evaluations mandatory after returning home from combat.
Anywhere where you saw combat, you would basically be required to have some mental health counseling.
The Black Box Project was awarded $3 million in funding from the VA earlier this year.
These things are everything to us. Without it, there's no project.
Ford says there's a long road ahead before understanding if and how they might prevent military suicides, and he hopes that one day this initiative may not only save the lives of service members, but countless others.
Why can't the insights we gain about people who've been traumatized before they joined the military and while they served, and apply those learnings to other people that have also been traumatized?
Fascinating and important work there. Our thanks to Em for that report. Stop Soldier Suicide says they anticipate publishing some new insights learned from this project before the end of the year. And if you or someone you care about is struggling with thoughts of suicide, text or call the Crisis Lifeline at 988. Free help is available 24/7.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.